Welcome everyone to RTS Masterminds. We are back. Long break because of several work-related things. I'm Balint Martin, lead systems designer on Titan Quest 2. Formerly, I worked on Total War Warhammers 2 and 3, as well as Halo Wars 2, as well as a little bit of Age of Mythology.
And I'm Brandon Castile. I'm the lead game designer on Tempest Rising, and I've done a bunch of indie stuff, and also I run the Wayward Strategy blog. Yeah, it's great to be back. I know we're both really busy, and sometimes it's hard to make this work, but we're sticking at it. We're not giving up anytime soon.
That's right, that's right. So today our topic is going to be regarding Stormgate and the overall struggles that the game and the developers of it are having. So, they had a pretty decent start considering that it's clearly an early access game. They were very upfront about that, they're doing this so that they can maximize the improvements over time with the community's help. They had like almost 5,000 players as a peak, but that has now dropped to just the mid hundreds. So 24-hour peak right now at the time of recording is just under 400, and their overall ratings are heavily mixed to the point where it's almost below 50% positive reviews. So what is going on, Brandon? Do you want to give us the top down on this?
Um, yeah, so it's a tough position for any developer to be in. Early access, a lot of games that launch into early access struggle, especially in the earliest days of early access. So that certainly has kind of borne out here as well, right? Um, Coming up to the early access launch, they were doing like a marketing push. There was a lot of hype going on. They had a bunch of streamers doing their game with Twitch drops and stuff at launch. Even their last beta, the impressions were overall pretty favorable, I think. But once you release a product, I think the expectations change. And I think it's fair to say, I don't know if this is actually a Total Biscuit quote or not, but um, I think it was John Bain that said early access launch is launch. Once you put your product out there, people are going to judge it as a product on its own rights. Um, and I think that's kind of what happened here. So I think it's fair to say people came to the game, um, whether or not it was a reasonable expectation, um, expecting final game quality content, and the there was a lot of mixed reception. Obviously, from Steam, there's a lot of mixed reception to specifically their co-op and even more so their single player content that was released. 1v1, I think the general reception has been more positive, but there's still definitely some issues there that we should probably cover during this. Um, but I think that's the starting point, right? That's where we can begin the conversation with, um, you know, they had a lot of buzz going on. Um, their beta, I think, was pretty successful. Their last beta was pretty successful. Um, but the expectations coming into the product, I think a lot of people felt like they didn't meet those for them.
Yeah,
Um,
certainly that's a very serious topic about having launch like expectations for the early access. And actually, at Grimlore Games, we're about to have that same step of launching into early access in the winter with Titan Quest. So it's definitely one of those spooky things that you have to be wary of. But I think in Stormgate's case, the marketing has been uh, what's a nice word for this? That they've been very much strong arming their capability as developers, right? So it kind of
yeah, they've definitely been.
sounded like you should expect something epic and incredible already at the very beginning, and not a rougher product that clearly requires tons of polish.
I mean, you can go to their website right now on playstormgate.com and read, how they presented the game, right? The next, the big next gen RTS, right, was kind of the first truly social RTS, next generation competition. I'm reading these things directly off their website right now. Um, So that's really, and I think it's fair to say that's their goal
Mhm.
for launch.
It's a good goal
But
to have, definitely.
people coming into the game now, I think, and I've seen this on Reddit and Steam community and other social media platforms. They're saying, where's the next gen? What's next generation about this game? Where's the truly social component? I think that's why. So one thing they did after their early access launch was they released a revised roadmap, because previous to their early access launch, they had kind of given a roadmap, and they are trying to now emphasize their 3v3 mode, which they say this is our big social component. This is our big um, next generation thing. Right? That's kind of their direction right now, is to try to kind of prove um, what their marketing has been saying this whole time.
Right, but you look at Warcraft, you look at the Age series, and 2v2s, 3v3s, 4v4s are like intrinsic to those games. They're probably bigger than the 1v1 aspects. Uh, so what's next gen about having 3v3? I know it's different here because you have the heroes and whatnot, and like they specifically direct it away from the 1v1 to make it different. But
Um,
what is next gen about it?
yeah, so I think that's what they're trying to do. So um, one of the things that I think has been a struggle is another, and I'm going to get back to 3v3,
Yep,
but one of the things that I think has been a struggle for the game right now in terms of monetization, and I think monetization is really important for them. Their launch as an early access product, they, I believe, prior to launch, said that they're going to use early access to monetize the continued development of the game. Um, and they're monetizing with the sales of co-op heroes and campaign missions. Um, there's a lot of feedback about the campaign, and I think that many people who purchased it didn't feel like it was giving them the value that they felt like they should have gotten from that at this point. Um, but the other piece of that is um, the co-op heroes, and a lot of the what I've seen about co-op is people saying, the co-op is fine, but I don't understand what the value proposition is for this versus StarCraft's co-op. Now, I think it's fair to say that for their co-op experience, they can say, we're continuing to develop this. We have more content coming, where StarCraft is pretty much in a long tail sort of support status, where they're getting minor quality of life patches every now and then. Um, but a lot of people are saying, there's more heroes, the leveling is there's more leveling, there's a lot more content. And I mean, it's hard to compete against something that's been out there for years and years at this point. I almost said 14 years, which isn't really the true for co-op, but what, 7 years at least, I think, probably. Um, Several years since co-op came to StarCraft. Um, and what they're trying to do, I think, is with 3v3, I believe the plan is to use those same heroes that you buy for co-op and bring them into the 3v3 mode. Now, there are some concerns about that as well. I think people are worried about pay to win. That you're buying better heroes
sure.
than free players have available. Um, but I think that's kind of what they want to do. Is we have this new content coming into the mode via these heroes. There's more reason to acquire these heroes, because you can use them both in co-op and in um, the 3v3 mode. That's my guess. That's not a confirmed thing, but that's kind of the through line that I'm following.
Hmm.
Um,
No, that makes sense. And, there was controversy about the cost of these DLCs as well. So basically, we're talking about uh, backers because the game has been heavily uh, community backed and funded, right? It's not just the big shadowy investors behind Stormgate. It's also the community actually stepping up and putting
right.
down millions of dollars altogether across all the platforms. And to have the early access launch and immediately have paid DLC that even the highest tier supporters had to buy separately, That did not go down very well with
No,
people.
absolutely. So for context, back when they did their Kickstarter, um, one of the Kickstarter tiers was for what they called day one or year one. I'm sorry, year zero. I think was what they said. Year zero DLC. So if you back at this level, the idea was that you get all of the first year of early access, all of the DLC for the first year of early access. And this was later clarified. Frost Giant clarified that, and they tried to make it clear that what they had meant was something different than what I think many people interpreted it to be. But when they launched into early access, there's this character Wars that you can purchase for as DLC, and none of the backers got him. And anyone who wanted him, anyone at all who played the game who wanted him, had to purchase him separately. And a lot of backers were offended, saying, I thought, since I backed the game, I put $300 into the game, that I get him for free. Um, and Frost Giant is now saying the next hero that comes out is going to be free to the backers
Yeah, it's just
as a
such
way
a
of making
strange
up.
little mix-up, isn't it? Like, if I'm gonna throw down hundreds of dollars, that's supposedly around the ceiling of what you can spend in the real final game, right? So, well, maybe not. Maybe maybe that assumption is silly of me, but let's say it is. Wouldn't it be wise of the developers to just say, "Okay, come on, do it early for us, support us now, and we'll just give you the whole thing."
Um, yeah, I think the way you phrased it is also how I'd phrase it, a mix-up. Either there was messaging issues, or this is an oversight that would have bought them some goodwill. Um, to say, okay, anyone who backed us on Kickstarter, you just get this character. Um, but I certainly don't think there was anything malicious in it. From Frost Giant's part.
Yeah, it seems like an
Um,
error that just happened, and then after the fact, it's actually really hard to fix with tracking it down, who you would owe it to, right? So,
right, and then there
and
were
they're a
people
small
who
team.
already backed and already
Mhm.
bought the character, and that's a tough
Yes.
situation to be in. So instead of saying, okay, everyone who backed gets him for free, where that's a huge logistical issue to work through, they said, okay, the next thing is free. But yeah, that was definitely an oversight or a snafu that didn't send a good message. And if that was the only problem, then I think there wouldn't have been a problem. There would have been some people that were upset, and then they were promised something. Um, and they were promised something, and then they said, okay, this was a misunderstanding. That's not a big deal.
Yeah, certainly that can be
Um,
overcome, but we have so much more to talk about, right? There have
right,
been,
exactly.
I
We're
mean,
kind of skipping the elephant in the room.
where do we
So that
start? What's your elephant? Let's hear yours first.
so for me it's the campaign.
Okay.
Um, the the primary way that Stormgate wants to monetize is through the campaign. The idea is that they're going to sell these mission packs that tell a story, and you follow along with the story, and you want to learn more about the story, so you buy the mission packs to continue supporting development and continue engaging with the story. Um, and to me, this is kind of the inflection point of many of the issues that Stormgate has had. Um, Now, I will preface this. We literally today and over the past couple days got some confirmations from Frost Giant. They released on X, on social media. I don't know if it's just the X platform, which used to be Twitter. I never know how to reference that. X is such a weird name. But they released a screenshot of a side by side of their old Amara model and their new one. And I think it's important to say that they're working on art updates. They also shared, I think, yesterday a screenshot of how the campaign is going to look with its new lighting changes.
Yeah, that's
Um,
nice.
so there's definitely they're making progress, and I think that is really important to say, because um, I think there's this impression that because they had a rough launch, that's kind of it, and they don't seem to think so.
So what's rough
Um,
about the campaign?
right. So specifically, and I'm trying to work my way my way toward this. So
Okay.
to me, the campaign is the inflection of a number of issues that Stormgate has had. The art itself is controversial, and in the campaign, there are numerous art issues that people have had, from the look of Amara, who's the main character for this first story arc. Um, there's been a lot of issues with the way the face is modeled and the proportions of her body. The arms are very long, and the I think the idea is that from top down it looks fine, but then when you use the same model for the close-ups, the proportions that were designed to be looked at, from a high camera angle, look very strange when you're looking at them, in a normal uh, forward perspective. But regardless why, that was one of the biggest points of controversy. Um, and things like characters in cutscenes are talking, and they do the kind of Warcraft 3, bobbing around instead of having a mouth that moves. And Frost Giant, again, has said that they're working on these things, but I think a lot of people came into the campaign with the expectation that they would basically be seeing launch quality content. Um,
Mm.
and I think Frost Giant didn't do a good job of setting expectations ahead of time, saying, we are giving you an early look at this. We are showing you the earliest possible version of this that we're comfortable with sharing. These are the things, like, I feel like leading up to launch, it probably would have been good for them to market saying, instead of this is the next generation RTS, help us build this. We are building this with you. Like, I feel like that, I mean, right, that should have been their messaging.
That would have
Um,
been so much cleaner as a communication strategy. I agree, because even I am kind of feeling what the community is feeling, that is this it is kind of what goes through my mind most of the time when I see Stormgate. And I want to be excited about big new RTS games, especially when this much is thrown at it in terms of resources, right? But they certainly have oversold uh, what was getting delivered, and
I
it
think
is
they were,
really the earliest look that they could have potentially given us. Because yeah, the campaign is playable now. Is it polished? Hell no. Uh, I've played through it myself, and I quit midway and actually decided to just fast forward some YouTube videos because I was not having a good time with it. Uh, to me, it also is a huge issue that the campaign isn't, uh, all that it would need to be in order to be a next gen RTS compared to StarCraft 2,
well,
which I love the
that's why
campaign
I
of
view
that a lot.
that's why I view this as the inflection point of a lot of their issues. If the campaign excited people, and they said, "Wow, I can't wait to learn more about this world, to learn more about these characters, to learn more about these factions, to learn more about the story." I feel like that would have bought a lot of goodwill
Mm.
if they hooked people with the campaign, and sold us on the world, sold us on the vision. Um, that would have been a good starting point. But a lot of people came into the campaign and they said, "Well, wait, isn't Amara just following Arthas's story, just sped up a little bit? Wait, isn't Amara's doing things we recognize from StarCraft and recognize story beats from Warcraft 3?" Um, and we're being introduced to characters like Malak, who the characters in the story seem to have some sort of previous relationship with, but we as players are questioning, who is Malak and why are we afraid of him? Um, besides the fact that he looks kind of creepy and there's a cutscene where he's got, fire tendrils going around. What history with Malak do these characters have? Actually, another big thing that I've heard, which does make sense to me, is the opening cutscene is the opening of the Stormgate and all of these, eyeball bat guys flying
Mm.
out through, and then it cuts to 20 years later, and we meet the daughter of the character we were introduced to in the cutscene.
It's
And a lot of
such
people are saying,
a
"Well, wait, no, tell us the story of 20 years before. What happens right after the?" Like, a lot of people were
yeah.
saying, "Give us an intro campaign of this. Give us 3 missions with the dad, um, and let us follow his story and see what happens in the earliest days." Uh, but to me, I don't care so much about that. But to me, I wanted to get invested in the world. I wanted to understand the story
Well,
and
look,
the characters,
we
and
know
I
that. Sorry, go on.
no, all I was going to say is I struggled to find find that. I was. It looks like the way things are developing in the story is, Amara gets this magical artifact, and then that becomes turns her into a villain, very similar to what happened with Arthas.
Mm.
And it seems not like its own thing, but it's like, let's give people these existing experiences they had in other Blizzard games. Um, and I feel like I can't help but feel, if the story gave me unique things to get hooked into, like my favorite faction to play is the Celestials, and I don't know anything about them yet in terms of the story. I know a little bit of stuff that came from outside the game, but I'm playing them in multiplayer, and I don't care. I don't know to care about what balls are, or why the Celestials use archangels, and um the Argent, what the Argent is in the Celestial Army, in the same way that I know what a Zergling is, or I was taught, in Warcraft 2 and 3, like you go recruit the trolls, and then they come join your army, and then you get access to them as units. So um I feel like what Frost Giant needed to do to hit the ground running in terms of making people care about their world, I don't feel like they did a superb job of that with what they're showing right now in the campaign.
Yeah, to be honest, for me, that is the biggest problem, that I don't have a connection to the world, because first off, I don't care about the characters, but even the factions themselves, just, uh, I don't know, there's no significant substance to it, especially if the campaign is a derivative of another game, Warcraft 3 in this instance, and the factions kind of work like derivatives of StarCraft 2, then I think we have a problem. We've been here before. Is it next generation if it's just rehashed ideas? I'm not sure. That
So I
doesn't seem
think
like a very strong offering to me somehow.
they're doing some really interesting things mechanically, especially with the Celestials. I think that the Celestials are, the way that they play. You don't get a lot of that in many other RTS. This kind of like, your base is kind of free flowing wherever you just happen to need buildings.
Okay, that is cool.
Um,
Yeah.
that I think that's really neat. So you have the arc ships, and they fly around, and wherever you have an arc ship, or they build the morph cores, and wherever you happen to have one, you can set up buildings. And I like the idea of the Celestials being encouraged to kind of plop down any structure offensively, because they have tech buildings that give your units extra armor, and they have another tech building that um, makes your units deal more damage. And it's really cool, that the idea that you want to plop down buildings everywhere and kind of fight around them, and build even tech buildings offensively. Um, there's not a lot of that exact experience elsewhere in RTS, but
True.
um,
Although there's a lot of dangers with things like the morph core being the origin point of these, because I'm sure you've seen at the very beginning when the faction came out, people were just morph core rushing others, and there was very great difficulty in actually defending that or spotting it in the first place. And then
ab-
you would watch that stuff in tournaments, and they would simply make basic units the whole game argents. They would just make argents the whole time and nothing else.
yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. And from my perspective, I would say, um, maybe these actual tournaments are a bit premature. Um, I think
yes.
early access is a great time. Early access is a great time to experiment with this high risk stuff. Right now, one of the biggest issues is with the Vanguard, the human Vanguard. They're the Scout, the dog unit, and the Hedgehog. They're very, very fast. And even though they don't do a ton of damage, I mean, hedgehogs actually do a decent amount of damage when they're masked. It's overriding. It's clogging up the strategic space, because it's so easy to succeed with these units, and a lot of people are frustrated by that meta right now. And
It is a
for
dog
early
eat dog
access,
world. Uh-huh.
excellent. I think early access is a great time to get some of this stuff out of the system, but it's tough when you're trying to show off the game live and in color. Basically, it's out in the wild, and that's what happens every match. Um, that's tough because people see that out there and they're like, well, I don't want to play the game where you just have a bunch of dogs and they kill things. That doesn't seem like it's so that's a tough situation for them to be in. I think because they both want the freedom to be able
Mm.
to have to take daring risks with their mechanical systems, but also have to try to make sure that it's okay for a competitive format at the same time. Um, that must be tough to juggle.
Yeah,
Um,
it's kind of a funny thing that, in fact, it turns out that Infernal is the faction that just uses most of their tools. Like, you just see basically all the units with that
mhm.
faction, and I think that's kind of nice. So at least that is moving in the right direction there. But even there, even when everything is used, I do think that the pace of the combat isn't necessarily a strong selling point for Stormgate. Sure, they want to move away from the um, armies just blowing themselves up in a matter of 2 3 seconds, like it's possible in StarCraft, right? Even there, it's you do have the longer fights sometimes, but in Stormgate, it is arguably as slow or slower than Warcraft 3, but you still play a macro RTS where you can go up to 300-ish population, and that's a lot. So you get the slow pace, you get the big armies, but you don't get the complexity of StarCraft-like abilities. Although in some cases they do exist and they are very StarCraft-like, like the I forget the celestial
The
sphere.
Animancer.
No, the
Oh, the
sphere
Cabal.
unit. Which one
It's
is
the
that?
Cabal, right? I think it's the
Yes.
Cabal.
Ah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I like the Cabal
I
a
just
lot.
call them
That's
balls.
probably
So,
my.
and anyway, yeah, they have this lift ability, same as the StarCraft Phoenix. Like we've been here before, as I was saying.
um,
And the Animancer
yeah,
have
and
the Storm version,
it's
right?
kind of like Psionic Storm plus fungal growth. It
Yeah,
it deals area of effect damage and slows
but you have to
while you're
channel it,
inside of
as
it.
I recall.
Yes, yeah, the
Yeah.
Animancer does have to channel it. Um, so yeah, we see some of the big rock right now with their design that they are trying to work around. Um, for sure. But I think it's fair to say that though their 1v1 has some issues like with the rushes and some of the dominant strategies right now, I think it's definitely their most polished gameplay experience. Um, and in some ways that's unfortunate for them because the other two, gameplay experiences are the ones that they're monetizing at the moment. Um, and it looks like they're working hard again. We mentioned earlier some of the changes that they've been sharing information about
Yeah.
recently on social media regarding improvements to the campaign. Um, but that actually that brings up another potential issue is they have co-op, which is a unique experience, and 1v1, which is a unique experience in the campaign, and they're talking about adding 3v3 to it. So there's definitely some concern out there about how do they juggle these four things now. They're talking about adding in 3v3, a version of 3v3 in October, I believe. And that's instead of three things they're trying to polish at once, this has now become a fourth thing that they're trying to improve. What do you think about that and the potential issues with spreading themselves thin over the rest of as they continue early access?
One would hope that they have separate people for it. Uh, I'm not sure that's the case though. They are self-proclaimedly relatively small, right? So definitely some people are wearing multiple hats, which hopefully works out. Like you can probably be the 1v1 and 3v3 guy at the same time because in essence they're both multiplayer, or you mix the 3v3 and the co-op people together because they're essentially working with the same tools. They have to worry about the exact same heroes. But campaign is probably a very different kind of story, and you need very different kinds of thinking to make campaign missions engaging, to guide players, and to uh,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. Although
worry about
from
exposition and things like that. It takes a very different kind of person.
yeah, absolutely. And from my experience, that there tends to be a at least some divide there with environment artists and narrative designers, as you were
Definitely.
saying. It's a very different sort of level design. It's a lot more involved than multiplayer level design. Multiplayer level design is a lot easier to iterate on because there's a lot less going on the maps. With triggers and scripts and all sorts of things that kick off and the cutscenes and um,
Yeah, you literally just change it and test it, make sure it works. And a campaign has so many dependencies and
right.
interconnected parts. Whereas in multiplayer, you just need this smooth experience with the terrain.
Hmm.
It does need to look good, obviously, so it has to go through still the whole pipeline of uh, level design, environments, art, audio, and all that. But VFX, you still have a self-contained experience there.
Right. Yeah, and it looks like with their map design tools, they're able to iterate fairly quickly with the multiplayer maps anyway. But yeah, I imagine they still have a second pass of environment artists and lighting and what have you.
Yeah. So, what do you think is next for the Stormgate team? Like, how do they resolve this situation? They've lost so much interest lately. Is it just going to spike again when they have a big update, or do they have to actually pivot to some kind of resolutions here? Because you can't have a 300 active player base. Sorry, not player base, but concurrent players
Concurrent players,
count,
yeah.
and fund such a big project as they need to.
So I think the next major content update is going to be a big thing for them. Not what's coming this month, not what's coming next month, but their next major content update. Releasing additional story missions. Um, like there had been some discussion, I think I mentioned something like this earlier about a mini campaign that would introduce the the father, Amara's father, and what happens immediately after the opening of the Stormgate. If they can knock it out of the park with something like that, like, hey, here's 3 missions. This represents the quality that we are proud of. This is like launch quality with great cutscenes and um, you know, introducing characters and getting people excited. I think that alone would be a really big deal. A lot of the rest of the stuff is iterative. Um, Multiplayer balance is going to be a moving target. Um,
Sure.
but it's something they're going to have to keep working on. But I don't think that
But you have to do the
actually I
masses
was
for
going to say
that, right?
I
Like
don't
you,
think a big I don't think a big balance I was going to say I don't think a big balance patch is would necessarily bring a lot of players back, but it actually might. Um, if they release a good set of patch notes and people are like, okay, I really want to try this out. Given the audience, it actually might help. Um, but co-op is going to continue to be iterated on. I don't think adding in an additional co-op hero is going to change much for them. But a big content drop that excites people, um, again, like a big balance patch, maybe in conjunction with a big piece of single player content, um, that might bring people back and say, something they can hold up and say, this is what we want to give you. This is what we're working towards. I think that would do a tremendous amount to turn people around on on what Stormgate is trying to do, what Frost Giant is trying to do. Because I think right now, again, I think people look at the current campaign and they'd say, what about this world interests me? What about this world attracts me? Um, and I think right now, given the existing content, it's kind of a hard sell. But being able to hold something up and say, this is what we want to give you. This is a complete experience. This is a beautiful corner, basically, um, of what we want to give you in the end. I think that would help sell people on the vision better than the stuff that they've currently released.
It's certainly tough, and to achieve any of this, you definitely need to pull in the masses. But one of the most complained about things is that the game doesn't visually impress. So they've gone for this uh, simplified, cartoony art style, right? Which is, to be fair, it gets to be timeless, right? Like even in 10, 20 years, this is Stormgate's look, and maybe it will be dated in some ways, but it certainly ages better than going for medium to high fidelity. But for today's expectations, it just doesn't really trump StarCraft 2 even too much. There's certainly more polygons to it, but from a distance, StarCraft 2 still looks phenomenal and has a really good lighting engine. Maybe that's going to be the magic here. But do you think Stormgate looks good enough to draw in the masses?
Um, yeah, I don't have a good answer for that. Um, I try to be one of those people that says the graphics, like I don't need, and I'm dating myself here, crisis level graphics, right? Um, I am happy to go back and play um, Red Alert 2 or Command and Conquer 3. Dune, Emperor Battle for Dune remains one of my favorite games. But I don't think a game that came out, an RTS that came out now that looked like Emperor Battle for Dune would necessarily get a big audience. Um, I think the remaining big issue, the remaining most outstanding issue with Stormgate, graphically, is that their tile sets, the actual map tile sets. There's still some kind of issues with them looking kind of blurry, and I think improving that, which it seems like they're taking steps to do, will help kind of bring the whole picture together when you're looking at screenshots or gameplay. Um, One of the other, I think, potential issues is the Vanguard still kind of have a very StarCraft 2 Terran sort of aesthetic to them. If they had gone more for like a post-apocalyptic, like a Fallout feel, I don't think that people would be upset in quite the same way or judging in quite the same way. In fact,
Right, they're too clean, aren't they?
shortly after, well, it's not just that they're too clean. It's that um, the the barracks itself, the actual Vanguard barracks, has elements that remind people of the StarCraft barracks. It's kind of like a StarCraft barracks wearing a coat.
Hmm.
Um, the command post for the Vanguard has some of the same shape language that the Terran Command Center has. Um,
This is no
Now,
accident. All three
no,
factions kind of
obviously,
pull
it's
themselves from the StarCraft universe, right?
um, I think the Infernal Host kind of harkens more to um, uh, undead
Mm.
from Warcraft 3. They have the similar kinds of like stone pillars with glyphs carved in them. They don't strike me as particularly Zergy. I mean, some of their air units maybe more so.
Yeah, the air
Um,
units mostly, I agree. And the fact that
but
they have a creep-like mechanic and, it's
it's
just,
similar to Undead Shroud though from
yeah,
Warcraft 3 as well. Um, but yes,
true.
yeah, obviously StarCraft players see that and they're like, "Oh, this must be creep." Um, which I don't necessarily think did them the most favors, but um, I was going somewhere with this. Oh, right after they launched into early access, they released an image showing a more distressed kind of post-apocalyptic skin set that they want to provide for the Vanguard. And I saw that and I immediately was like, wow, this is what I wanted in the first place. Like this
Mm.
is what the setting would give me to expect. Yeah, I'll grab it and we can share it up on screen on YouTube. Um, but yeah, I saw that and it immediately gives them more of their own character. It really, to me, just the updated skins help me sell me on kind of their world and their universe and them being more their own thing. And even doing some sort of like skin pass on some of these things, I think would help. I know another one that some people have issues with is the brute. the tier 1 infernal kind of melee combatant that people feel like it looks um not threatening enough. And I know they have the Weaver that a lot of people, almost everyone I think, seems happy with the Weaver's kind of aesthetic. And changing some of the skins to make them look a little more darker, I think would help. So I think there are changes they could make to improve things without doing completely new, like a completely changing their art style. Um, just with modifying what they have there from terms of lighting and skins. And again, I know from Tempest Rising that a good lighting pass can really change how a game looks. Um, I've seen that as our game continues to
Oh,
develop.
certainly.
How much, changing some materials, changing the quality of the light alone, those things alone. I'm not really technical, so I don't have um a lot of authority to talk about the technical aspects of all of the different things that they can change there. But um I know from my perspective that there's a lot that they can do with some relatively simple tools, without having to recreate a ton of their assets from scratch.
Yeah, I think we have summed up pretty much all the major areas then. Um, I guess closing thoughts from me would be that there definitely is a game here that, does deserve to be fully born. I just hope that the developers can make the right next steps because they are losing their grip on the community's interest at the moment. It's really not our job to identify what those are, but I hope we did give some food for thought at the very least, and that will help a little. And maybe the comment section will too.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope if any of the Frost Giant developers see this, I really enjoyed playing the Celestials in particular. Obviously, I'm kind of biased because the Celestials are, they've kind of got this mix of Protoss and Command and Conquer, and I'm a kind of a C and C guy. Um, so that might be part of it. But I really enjoyed the mobile play style of being able to plot buildings down on the front lines and float my command center around. I thought that was a lot of fun. I think there are some really interesting elements that they've got going for them. Um, and I like you said, I really hope they can manage to have their next couple of updates turn community sentiment around, because this isn't an RTS I went into and struggled to find the fun just playing it. Like, sitting down to play the game is enjoyable. There are unenjoyable things that happen, but that's going to happen. This is a product in development. Um, but I think the next couple of steps for them are going to be their trickiest ones as they navigate their way forward. Um, and I really hope that they can manage to continue to iterate on this product, because I think there are some good ideas there, and it's definitely inherently, like, when you sit down to play it, it's inherently an enjoyable experience. Um, so yeah, I think that's probably where I will leave it for now.
Yeah, that's all good. So, yeah, there are many, many platforms that we are on. Pretty much all the standard podcast platforms like Spotify or Amazon Music or even the Apple one. Feel free to use whatever you like to just listen. We're obviously on YouTube, and we have a Patreon where you can support us, join our secret Discord. Don't tell anyone. Where you can actually request episodes and specific topics for us to cover. And next time, we will be looking at some other RTS game that came out recently. Perhaps it has something
There's so much
interesting.
stuff out there, including some great success stories like Age of Mythology Retold and Sins of a
Mm-hmm.
Solar Empire 2.
Both of
I actually
them.
wanted to mention Sins 2 in the context of Stormgate, because they actually did their early access on Epic Game Store, and they had a really rough early access launch too, with one faction, and they had some issues kind of with being on Epic, and again with one faction, and they came really far, and they came out the gate swinging on Steam, and it's been a phenomenal success for the
Oh
studio.
yeah. I already
Um,
played like 50 hours, so we'll be very happy to unpack this with you next time.
wow. Yeah, yes, there's some great options for the next one in 2 weeks.
All right, thanks everyone, and we'll see you in the next one.
All right, see you next time.